Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. First of all, thanks to Allah Subhanahu wa Ta'ala who always given health, blessing, and salvation for all of us so that we can see this video presentation without trouble at all. And may salawat and salam for our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam who always give goodness in this beautiful world. And the last, I'd like to say thank you for the honorable supervisors, Sir Munir SPD MED Tisol, and Dr. Nur Aini SPD MPD. And not forget to mention the honorable examiners, Sir Hairil Anwar Korompot, SPD MA PhD, and Mem Nurfitri S, SPD MPD. I'm Yuniarsih Azizah, and welcome to my proposal video presentation with the title An Analysis of Inhibiting Factors Affecting Students' English Speaking Performance. Without wasting any more time, let's move to the next slide. So in this video presentation, we'll divide it into two parts. First is Chapter 1, Introduction. Next is Chapter 2, Literature Review. And the last is Chapter 3, Methodology. In Chapter 1, Introduction, we'll explain about background of study, statement of problems, objective of study, and significance of study. Next is Chapter 2, Literature Review. We'll explain about theoretical framework and conceptual framework. And the last chapter is Methodology. Will be explained about research design, place and time of research, population and sample of research, research instrument, technique of data collection, procedure of collecting data, and the last is technique of data analysis. Chapter 1, Introduction. First thing we will talk about in this chapter is background of study. So English is most widely spoken language in the world today, and is also the mother tongue, the mother language spoken by more than 400 million people spread all over the world. English is also one of the international languages which are used as the official language in United Nations. By learning English as a second or foreign language, besides conserving Indonesian as the mother tongue, Indonesian people will have bigger chance to get to know the world because the new language, especially English, allow us to assume or at least imitate different personalities than what we are used to in our mother tongue. And it can make it easier for us to blend in wider environment. In Indonesia itself, English is one of the compulsory subjects taught by school ranging from elementary school, junior high school, and senior high school. The government decision to set English as one of the compulsory subjects at various levels of education is not without the reason, but to prepare the Indonesian generation to be able to compete globally. There are 4 basic skills in English, including listening, speaking, reading, and writing. But in many contexts, a skill that is often used to judge someone directly is speaking. Through speaking skills, a person can communicate and convey what is in their mind, ideas, feelings, or even emotion to other people. As Richard and Renandia in 2002 said that speaking is one of the central elements of communication. And therefore, without speaking skills, it can be difficult to interpret the ongoing communication. Otherwise, with great and fluent speaking skills, people will find it easier to reach their goals, improve business, build confidence, get better job opportunities, make public speeches, attend interview, and so on. But even though English has been studied for years in Indonesia, there are still many people, especially students, who still find it difficult to speak in real-time situation when asked, because speaking skill is not an easy skill to master. This is in line with the opinion of McLaren, Madrid, and Buno in 2005 that said, in quote, speaking is one of the most difficult skills language learners have to face. besides speaking skill is indeed difficult to master, it is known that there are inhibiting factors that make it difficult for students to improve their speaking skills. Those inhibiting factors, of course, should not be ignored because without good speaking skills, students will experience difficulties in teaching learning activities, such as in the question and answer process, which is closely related to speaking skills. And if teaching learning activities are disrupted, in the end, the learning outcomes obtained by students will not be optimal. There have been previous studies that have talked about the factors that inhibit students' English speaking performance. First is a research conducted by Nolita in 2018 entitled Inhibiting Factors Affecting Students' English Speaking Ability, a case study at PBIU in Araniri. This study is a study that used both qualitative and quantitative approach with a case study method. The data sources or informants in this study were college students from the entrance year 2014. And in the data collection process, questionnaires and interview were used as the technique of collecting data. Moreover, Norlita's research results showed that the factors that hindered students in speaking English consisted of grammatical errors, pronunciation errors, lack of vocabulary, feeling of shame, anxiety, pauses in speaking, and feeling of hesitation. In addition, students also usually feel that there is nothing to say. The learning environment portion from parents and feeling embarrassed to speak in front of many members of the opposite gender because he or she was the only boy or girl in the class were also present as the inhibiting factors for students to speak English. Another research was conducted by Tasmia in 2019 entitled Students' Problem in Speaking English at 8th grade of Riyadul Amin Islamic Boarding Junior High School, Moro, Jambi. The research design used qualitative approach with this descriptive method. For the data sources of or informants, Tasmia chose 8th grade students at Riyadul Amin Islamic Boarding Junior High School, Moro, Jambi. In addition, observation, interviews, and documentation were used as techniques of data collection. The result of the study showed that students have difficulty in grammar, and this was proven by the only few students who master grammar. Students also experience problems with their pronunciation, as seen from the result of student interviews. Lack of vocabulary is also present as the problem faced by students in their speaking. In interview with English teacher, the teacher said that students' speaking ability was still low because the average student at the school still lack on mastering vocabularies, and the last problem is students are afraid and feeling ashamed if they make mistakes. From these previous studies that have been mentioned, there are differences with this research, which is expected to bring new knowledge in the world of education. The first difference is the framework used as reference in this research is more recent and more varied than the framework Nolita and Tasmia used. Therefore, it is hoped that the result of the study will reveal more inhibiting factors in speaking based on framework. In addition, this study targets different subjects from previous research. So it is hoped that it can provide new perspective on the relevant research theme. The next difference is that this research was conducted after the COVID-19 pandemic, and there may be differences in the problems experienced by students before the pandemic. So this research is expected to be able to analyze those new problems. And the last one is the study will use in-depth interviews as the technique of collecting data or data collection. With this technique, the researcher will try to dig up as much information as possible from the data sources so that the readers can receive maximum information. Therefore, the researcher is interested in carrying out this research entitled An Analysis of Inhibiting Factors Affecting Students' English Speaking Performance. Next is the statements of problems. Referring to the problems stated in the background, the researcher attempts to conduct a study about factors that obstruct students in English speaking skills by addressing the question, what are the inhibiting factors affecting students' English speaking performance? Next is objective study. The researcher intends to achieve objective through the study, which is to identify the inhibiting factors affecting students' English speaking performance. Next is significance of study. The results of the study are expected to provide benefits both theoretically and practically. For theoretically, the results of the study are expected to first contribute to the development of the world of education, especially in English field. Second, can be used as a comparison with similar research that has been done before. And the last is can be used as a reference for the design further research. For practically, will be divided into three parts: for teacher, for student, and for the researcher. First is for teacher. With the result of the study, teachers are expected to be able to improve their professionalism in dealing with and assisting students in overcoming the factor that hinder them speaking English ability, and also can be used as supporting study material to reflect on various kinds of learning methods to help improve student English after knowing the factor that can inhibit students in their speaking English performance. Next, for students, after participating in this research process, it is hoped that students can get the benefit that is being aware of the problems they face, especially the factors that can obstruct them in their speaking English performance, and therefore they can try to overcome those problems, and in the end are expected to be able to have positive impacts on student learning outcomes. And the last is for researcher. As an education student who is likely to enter the education field, the study is expected to provide benefits in terms of adding knowledge and insight related to the title of the study so that researcher can become a high quality educator. So that is the chapter 1. We can move to the next slide. Next slide is chapter 2, literature review. In this chapter, the researcher focuses on review of related literatures that divided into two parts, the theoretical framework and the conceptual framework. For the theoretical framework, we will talk about the first is the concept of speaking. So speaking is the process of building and sharing meaning through the use of verbal and nonverbal symbols in various contexts. It is one of the most important skills that must be practiced communicating orally, and by speaking, people can express ideas and feelings to each other. In language teaching and learning, speaking is considered a skill to practice and master. According to Chelsea Murcia in 2001, speaking is a complex skill which should be taught everywhere, and it is a skill that learners learn better in group. Clausen in 2016 said that speaking refers to verbal language and it is considered a challenging competency. It allows the speakers to communicate and express their self with other people by using verbal language. But speaking does not only a way to communicate with other people, but it has messages and intention which will be discovered by listener, as explained by Saputra and Lagianto in 2015. Next is importance of speaking for students. Leong and Ahmadi in 2017 have mentioned three importance of speaking. First, speaking helps students to make effective communication by integrating each supporting competencies in speaking. Second, speaking supports students to express their ideas and thoughts through some speaking activities. Then they can properly express their opinion as they already practice in speaking class. And the last is speaking integrates other competencies in speaking, such as grammar, vocabulary, and pronunciation. Next is type of speaking performance. According to Brown in 2007, there are some basic types of speaking. First, start with imitative. So imitative is the ability of to simply parrot back or imitate a word or phrase or possibly a sentence. So the student is simply trying to repeat what was said to them in a way that is understandable and some adherence to pronunciation as defined by the teacher. Second is intensive. Intensive speaking involves ability to producing short stretches of oral language and is designed to demonstrate competence in a narrow band of grammatical, phrasal, lexical, or phonological relationship. Next is responsive. Responsive stage includes interaction and test comprehension, but at the limited level of very short conversations, standard greetings and small talk, simple requests, and comments. Next is interactive. The difference between responsive and interactive speaking is in the length and complexity of interaction, which sometimes includes multiple exchanges or multiple participants. And the last is extensive. Extensive speaking is oral production task that includes speeches, oral representation, and storytelling. We will move to the next slide that will be talk about factors inhibit students in their speaking performance. It has been mentioned that students face problems in learning to speak. According to Hanifa in 2018 and Humaira in 2015, there are two main factors that inhibit students in speaking, which are affective factors and cognitive factors. First is affective factors. The affective factors are the factors that appear as students get negative results from the process of learning English in the classroom. In affective factors, there are several subfactors. First is lack of motivation. In the process of teaching and learning to speak, students need encouragement from teacher and friends. They will get more active in participating in the classroom as they receive motivation from friends and teachers. Often, students will have no bravery to speak as a result of the lack of motivation given by other students and teacher in the classroom. The second factor is shyness. It starts inhibit students in speaking as they are asked to perform speaking in front of the class in the form of dialogue, speech, and even presentation. The result makes students forget the words that they have to say in speaking performance. Next, lack of self-confidence is the next factor inhibiting student in speaking. Limited knowledge possessed by students related to English certainly makes students have low self-confidence. The situation might get worse as they see some of their friends do not easily understand their speaking performance in the classroom. Next is self-esteem. Self-esteem inhibits students as they have evaluated their competence in the wrong way. So for this case, teacher should teach teacher should taught a student ways to appreciate their speaking competencies. Next is feeling toward topic. Feeling toward topic is counted as the factor inhibit student in speaking. Hanifa in 2018 states that students have to put interest in topics before they perform their speaking. Good performance of speaking is seen as students already understand topics or material of speaking. Topics will also motivate students to learn to speak in the classroom. So if the student don't put interest in the topic, student will can feel unmotivated to learn speak. Next is feeling toward interlocutor. Interlocutor also bring influence toward students' speaking performance. Negative comments and critiques given by teacher and friends as the listener of speaking can make students feel down and lose eagerness to study and speak. Therefore, feeling toward interlocutor must be given full attention by all of the people in the classroom, especially the teacher and the other student. The last factor of effective factors is self-consciousness. Self-consciousness refers to students' condition who always compare their competency with their friends' competency. Feeling so much pressure is the result of comparing their competency, and it is felt by the student before performing their speaking in front of the class. They have this feeling as they are afraid of failing in performing speaking in front of class. Move to the next main factor, which is cognitive factor. So this factor mostly deal with students' knowledge of English. The result of cognitive factors might make worse student anxiety and nervousness. Cognitive factors include first, grammar. So students feel inhibit in learning to speak as they do not master the knowledge of grammar, and it's cause the student don't have eagerness to participate actively in the classroom. Next is vocabulary. Students who have problems in learning new words and combining words trigger vocabulary as the factor inhibiting student in speaking. Next is pronunciation. So pronunciation inhibits students for they do not ways don't know the ways to pronounce correct words in English in a more proper way. And the last two factors inhibiting students in speaking are topic and familiarity of the genre. Both of the factors are caused by students' limited knowledge in comprehending the topic and characteristic of each genre. The factor begin to inhibit students as they don't talk much in their speaking performance. Move to the next slide, conceptual framework. So we will start in students speaking English performance, and we will see the inhibiting factors affecting students English speaking performance. There are two main factors. First is affective factors and cognitive factors. The affective factors have lack of motivation, shyness, self-confidence, self-esteem, feeling toward topic, feeling toward interlocutor, and self-consciousness. And cognitive factors include grammar, vocabulary, pronunciation, topic, and familiarity of genre. And that is the chapter 2. We will move to the next slide. Chapter 3, Methodology. So the first part in Chapter 3 is research design. In the study, the researcher will use a qualitative descriptive. Qualitative descriptive is a research method that moves on simple qualitative approach with an inductive flow. This inductive flow means that qualitative descriptive research begins with an explanatory process or event which finally can be drawn as a generalization, which is a conclusion from the process or event. Next is place and time of research. This research will be carried out at SMK SMT Makassar, which is located at Jalan Pajayang, nomor 18A, Sudiang Raya, Kecamatan Beringkanaya, Kota Makassar, Sulawesi Selatan. Meanwhile, for the time of research will start in May 2022 and will end in indefinite time, or in other words, the research will be stopped if the researcher has obtained the required results. Next is population and sample of research. So, according to Sugiono in 2013, the population is a generalization area consisting of object or subjects that have certain quantities and characteristics determined by a researcher to be studied and then drawn conclusion. Meanwhile, the sample is a part of the element of populations, or the elements of the population. However, in qualitative research, the term population and sample are not appropriate to use. The population or sample in qualitative approach is more accurately called the data sources in a social situation. But to make it easier for the researcher, the term population will still be used in the study. Therefore, the population in this study will be the 12th grade student of SMK SMT Makassar in the 2021 and 2022 academic year. As for the selection of data sources or informants or participants, non-probability sampling will be used. According to Sugiono in 2013, non-probability sampling is a sampling technique that doesn't provide equal opportunities for each member of the population to be sampled. These sampling techniques include systematic sampling, quota, accidental, purposive, saturated, and snowball. Furthermore, snowball sampling will be used in this study. Snowball sampling is a technique for selecting data sources that initially are few, but gradually become many. This is because even the data collection process, those few data sources cannot be able to provide the required data, the researcher will add or look for other data sources, and thus the number of data sources will get bigger. Because the researcher will be used snowball sampling, the number of data sources in this data has not been determined, but will only be done when the researcher begins to enter the field and during the researcher. Therefore, the researcher only determined English teachers who teach 12th grade students of SMK SMT Makassar as the temporary data sources and will add the number of data sources if needed. Next is technique of data collection. The technique of data collection, according to Sugiono, can be done by observation, interview, questionnaire, documentation, and combination of the four. But in the study, the researcher will be used the interview as the technique of data collection. Interview is a form of dialogue conducted by the researcher to obtain information from the informant. To be more specific, semi-structured interviews will be used in the study. The semi-structured interview is included in the in-depth interview category, where the researcher is free to conduct the interview using only interview guide, that contain outlines. Or in other words, the researcher can ask questions that have been included in the interview guide. Then one by one, the questions are deepened, but still within the scope of the research topic to be studied. Next is a research instrument. Research instruments play an important role in collecting data and in the entire research activities. Arikonto in 2016 stated what is meant by data collection instrument are tools that are selected and used by the researcher in their collecting activities. So the researcher activities become systematic and facilitated by them. In qualitative research, according to Nasution, in Romanson Panjaitan in 2017, the researcher is the key instrument or main research tool, with the understanding that it is the researcher who conducts observation or unstructured interviews. Therefore, the researcher is one of the research instruments in the study. Meanwhile, another instrument used in interview as the technique of data collection is the interview guide. The interview guide contains a list of questions that have included themes and flow of discussion as a guide to controlling the course of the interview. Move to the next slide. Is a procedure of collecting data. The data collection process will be carried out in orderly manner as follows. First, researcher goes to the field to meet the first data source. Then researcher conduct interviews with the data sources, next, in the interview process, the researcher will use interview guidelines when asking the question and then deepen the question if there are the opportunities. Fourth, researcher records the conversation between the researcher and the data source to be used as a backup of researcher's notes. Next is researcher use notebooks to write down answer from the data sources. And then researcher will ask the first data source about the recommendation for the next data sources. And then researcher proceed the data. And the last, if the data obtained is still not saturated, step 2 until 7 will be carried out repeatedly. Move to the next slide, which will be talk about technique of data analysis. So data analysis technique is the process of collecting data systematically to facilitate researcher in obtaining conclusions. Conclusion will be easily obtained when the data analysis technique is correct. Therefore, in this research, the researcher decided to use qualitative data analysis technique stated by Mills, Huberman, and Saldana in 2014, which consists of 3 concurrent flow of activities. First is data condensation, second data display, and third, drawing or verification conclusion. First is data condensation. Data condensation refers to the process of selecting, focusing, simplifying, abstracting, or transforming the data that appear in full body of written up field notes, interview, transcripts, documents, and other empirical materials. By condensing, the data will be made stronger. Next is data display. Data display is an organized and compressed collection of information that will help understand what happened in the research process and help analyze further information and take the next steps, such as drawing conclusions. The data display can consist of various types of matrices, graphs, networks, and charts. And the last one is drawing or verifying conclusions. Conclusion drawing or verification is the final stage in the data analysis process. In qualitative research, the conclusion characteristic is temporary, It can change if the researcher doesn't find strong evidence to support further data collection. Therefore, the final conclusion may not appear until the data collection is over. However, if the conclusion in the previous data can be evidenced by validity and consistency when the researcher is going back to the field, the conclusion is credible. These three parts of analysis activities, together with the data collection activities, form an interactive clinical process. So that's all from my video presentation. I'm really sorry if there are many mistakes and mispronunciation in this video. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.